Well, good afternoon and welcome to the Hub 24 Future of Managed Portfolios webinar. My name is Simon Hoyle. I'm Head of Market Insight for Core Data Research, and I'm joined today by a stellar lineup of talent who I'll introduce to you now. On my left we have Jason Entwistle. Jason is Director of Strategic Development at Hub 24. Welcome, Jason.
Thanks, Simon.
Seeing as it's your boardroom, welcome. James Louw is Head of Advice and Investment Solutions for Morningstar. Welcome, James.
Thanks.
And Ben Moore is a Director of the fund management firm AB. Welcome, Ben.
Thank you, Simon. Great to be stellar.
So today we've got quite a few issues to run through. We're going to touch on a number of issues that are relevant to managed portfolios and the business of delivering advice. We are open to questions from all listeners today, or all viewers today. The lines into the webinar will be muted, so if things get a bit rowdy in the outside world, we might be able to hear them. If you have any questions, please type them into the control panel, which should be on your computer screen, and we'll see them pop into the room here. They'll be moderated, and then at the end of the formal part of the webinar, our panelists will answer the questions, or as many of the questions as we can, that have come in. So, without further ado, managed portfolios, as we all know, continue to evolve very rapidly as technology continues to advance. With $60 billion already invested and the industry set on some estimates to grow as much as 40% a year until 2020, what does the future hold for managed accounts? We're going to attempt to answer those questions today. We're going to have a look at what the industry will look like post the Royal Commission. We'll question whether customisation is the way of the future. We'll have a look at what future advice models will look like as well, how funds and platforms are helping support advisors meet their best interests duty and the related obligations. And we'll also discuss what the future holds for platform technology. So to get the ball rolling, Ben, I might ask you to just make some big picture observations about how you see the state of the managed portfolio market at the moment.
Yeah, I think it's been a chance for whether it be licensees or practices or advisors to just reassess their offering. We've certainly found as fund managers our engagement with the underlying practice and the advisors, the platforms, as well as the independent consultants, is as in-depth and as good as it's ever been. So it's sort of see it as a reassessment. People have said, I may have been doing things a certain way on whether it be from financial advice and building model portfolios. Here's my chance to do something different. And we're seeing more opportunities than we've ever seen before.
That's great. Thanks, Ben. James?
Yeah, I think no matter where you look, there's a survey or review of some sorts that talks about the undeniable business efficiencies for advisors of managed accounts. But I think it's really important that as an industry we probably don't lose sight of and actually go back to the mission and purpose for which a managed account was actually constructed in the first instance, for advisors acting as fiduciaries. And as we look around the industry, there's never been more focus on advisors meeting their fiduciary obligations. So if I look at the industry and probably where we are today, is that there's been a lot of momentum. I do sort of have a concern at times. I think managed accounts are being sold as this magical product. In actual fact, it's just a great vehicle that is there to enable clients to achieve their goal, and it really hasn't changed for the last 2 decades that we've been working with managed accounts. So,
thanks, James. Jason?
Look, I think out of the Royal Commission, there's going to be a real focus on how we deliver advice to clients. And managed accounts are a great vehicle for implementation of advice. They really industrialise that process. And I think we'll see more and more moving away from just that blunt instrument, one-size-fits-all type managed account, to one that's very customised for the client needs, their circumstances, and hopefully delivering a much better outcome for them, which I think is consistent with all of the outcomes likely out of the Royal Commission.
Great, thank you. We might stick with you for a moment, Jason. Can you give us your insights into where you think technology is leading the advice industry? And in fact, is technology leading the advice industry, or is the more appropriate role for technology to follow and support advisors in what they want to do?
That's a big question, Simon. Look, I think technology, to answer that last bit first, technology tries to solve problems. And technologists and entrepreneurs who behind some of the fintechs we've got in our industry now, really they're trying to solve a problem, a pain point, a friction that exists, and applying new technology to that problem. So I think that the industry really comes up with the issues, and technology tries to solve it rather than the other way around. In terms of where technology is heading for managed accounts, I think there's a lot of forces in our industry, not just the Royal Commission. There's a lot of forces that are going to change the industry significantly over the next few years. And obviously with Vassia coming on, lots of advisors may be leaving the industry, we keep hearing, and there's probably other headwinds, meaning less advisors in future. And yet clients, every survey shows clients want more advice. And maybe not the traditional clients, the clients that outsource everything to an advisor, but clients who are happy to do a lot themselves, but every now and then they want to check in with an advisor and ask, am I on the right track, am I doing the right thing? Especially when there's that fear part of the cycle where everything's going down and what do I do? So I think managed accounts can play a really significant role in delivering different advice models, maybe less high touch, maybe lower value, higher volume, but using that industrialisation and personalisation that technology can provide to deliver an outcome for clients that is really valuable, but maybe a different model than what we're used to today.
And so what are some of the technology developments do you think that advisors need to be aware of and really should be across?
Well, this doesn't stop. So, in the last few years, or last decade, all the mobile device technology came along. We are seeing great advances in the way we can automate and make things really frictionless for clients. So there's a number of applications out today where you can create an account in 30 seconds as a direct client. Some of those raised type direct models, for instance, great technology to make it really easy to do things. And I think that technology will basically be washed across all industries and every part of every industry to make things more efficient and deliver better outcomes and much better experiences.
And so how does that impact the way that advisors actually are able to deliver advice to clients?
Well, I think it comes back to what I was saying before about self-service and possibly leveraging some of the robo and maybe AI down the track technologies so that clients can, while they're engaging with an advisor, maybe it's assisted by technology in a way that there's very little actual manual input by an advisor, but the client's getting an outcome and they can check in with a person when they want. So I'm not talking a situation where technology replaces advisors, but certainly I think an advisor in conjunction with technology can deliver a much better outcome.
Okay. And how is it changing potentially things like the fee structures and so on that advisors are able to put in place for the delivery of the advice offer?
Yeah, well, the way that we've been thinking about it is, we hear an industry statistic which is 109 clients per advisor. So that's as many clients as an advisor services. We're trying to think about technology in terms of what if we could allow the advisor to service 1,000 clients with the same staff and basically the same costs for doing business. But in that model, it would be lower touch and possibly the client, or most likely the client paying less for that. But the advisor's still ahead in terms of the actual return on investment in their business. Now I think there's lots of ways we can help delivering that. Managed accounts is a really core part of that. If we can industrialise and automate that portfolio management piece, that takes a lot of the real hard work out of the advisors' back office efficiency.
Got it. Okay. Thanks, Jason. That's great. James, from your perspective, as you've watched the managed accounts, the managed portfolios industry grow and develop, what are some of the key developments that you've observed, and how has this improved, do you think, the outcomes that have been created for clients?
Absolutely. So, look, I think I'll probably answer that question by almost saying to our experience in the managed account space and what that is focused on, because that's where we've seen the sort of changes in innovation. So, as a firm, we've never started working in managed accounts in the late 90s. It wasn't really until 2011 we really ramped that up to the next level. And those when a number of advice firms that strategically partnered with us said they were looking for a investment solution that provided their clients beneficial ownership of assets, transparency, the ability to better manage clients' tax affairs, etc. So with that sort of goal in mind, when we worked with our clients on that, it was very much starting with direct securities as the first sort of portfolio construction mechanism, and then it was ETFs and then managed funds. So the reason why I call that out is, as you look at the innovations that have taken place, if you go back to 2011 to today, platform innovation, to what Jason just mentioned, has gone up to a whole new level to what it was then. So as a firm, I know we work very closely with our platform partners, and I don't use that word loosely, we do consider them partners, because it's about ensuring that clients get the return to which they're entitled to, and that it really is a partnership in getting that outcome. Secondly, today there's a proliferation of ETFs available in portfolio construction relative to what existed in 2011. And then the third thing, I think, what we have seen, particularly from our perspective, I think the number one and huge investment in our business over the last 5 or 6 years as we engage with platforms has been having operating processes and procedures in place when you're dealing with direct securities on platform, again going to that point of making sure that the return to which clients are entitled to, they actually get.
We've spoken about that, you and I have spoken
Yes.
about that a little bit before. Can you just explain that in a little more detail? Where can that disconnect happen if the execution or the management is not spot on?
Yeah, absolutely. If you think about executing an investing portfolio in a fund, it's a fund implementation and there's a return on the fund, and that is what you get as applied to all unit holders. In a managed account, and when you're implementing that, if you're implementing the same portfolio across 6 different platforms, and you're going to market on that, you potentially is the liquidity available on a particular security when that's around, and particularly if you're executing that, let's say, across different platforms. What systems are in place to ensure that the source model return is what it should be? And then how do you measure, once you've done a trade update and you've rebalanced the portfolio, how do you measure that there's no implementation leakage involved that is negatively impacting the clients? And hence why I say those conversations, I know from our operations and team and I work with the platforms, are pretty robust and in depth to make sure we're getting that outcome. Because you don't, the biggest cost to a client not achieving their goals is actually implementation leakage.
Got it. Jason, how does technology address the implementation leakage issue?
Look, I think that we're getting to an area where I could say that not all platforms are the same here. So I think there's generations in managed account development. Internally, we say we're sort of generation 6 here at HUB24, been live money since 2009. And we certainly know along that journey, we've learnt a lot along the journey of what works and what doesn't. And so there's been a lot of tweaking of the model, making it more real time where we can, and replicating really what the manager's trying to do. Ultimately, these things are delivering the intellectual property of the fund manager as efficiently as possible. And there's a lot of really good arguments as to why a managed portfolio is better and more efficient than a managed fund, for instance. But what we're really trying to do is take that intellectual property and deliver it to each individual account as if the manager made the decision on that account. And that's a really hard thing. When you've got thousands and thousands of portfolios, it's not easy to do. So we've spent a lot of the time over the years tweaking and re-engineering the engine to deliver that underlying end result. I'm not sure what your experience is with Hub, but we've had, because you're dealing with a lot of platforms, but we certainly have spent a lot of time doing that. And we used to, not so much anymore, we used to actually measure ourselves against the others, make sure there was no implementation leakage, and we could pick when someone else hadn't done the right thing.
Now, Ben, in some respects, you're kind of at the end of the process. I hope you don't mind me putting it that way.
No, happy to be at the end.
But from your perspective, as the provider of investment product onto the platforms,
Yep.
what innovation have you seen? What innovations have you been able to work with the providers to bring to market?
By far and away, the biggest one's been the ability for clients to own direct global equities. And it was through HUB24 that we were able to launch our concentrated global portfolio for the first time in this market. We wouldn't have been able to do that. We didn't want to form that particular product as a fund. So for an individual, through an advisor, to actually select a manager to go and buy companies like Charles Schwab, but not have to think about when to buy or sell that. It's innovative because there's a lot of work that had to go on to do that. And we've done it in other markets around the world, but the custody agreement process is phenomenal. And talked about leakage before, you've got to get that right. And having those custody agreements with the various exchanges around the world to ensure that if we have made a change, and I can say in the last month, given what's happened in the markets, we've been buying positions that have been sold off. For a client to be able to wake up in the morning knowing that that's happened to exactly the same way as we've done it in London or New York, is you have to have that. You can't have that leakage. But yeah, global separately managed accounts has certainly been, it's given us the ability to bring our PMs to town that we would have been able to.
So a question I'd like to throw to all of the panellists at this point is just a general question about some of the issues that have arisen during the public hearings of the Royal Commission, and how we think a managed portfolio or managed account approach to delivering an investment solution might address some of the issues that we've seen come up.
I think, really, managed accounts should only be offered, advised and recommended if they're in the client's best interest. And I think today is there's good arguments as to why they are. Within a managed account versus an equity managed fund, there are tax benefits and potential fee benefits that you just can't get. And deferring tax for quite a long time, if that is possible within a managed account, it's a really big impact on the client's book. And in retirement benefits. So, arguable today, it can be in the client's best interest. I think where we're heading is that managed accounts could be clearly in the client's best interest. If we can take their circumstances into account, being tax and cash flows, and add that to their preferences, it might be an ethical overlay or whatever, then we can clearly deliver an individualised outcome for that client that is not only makes them feel good and has all that transparency and all those benefits, but it is actually delivering a better portfolio outcome for them because we're taking into account those tax circumstances and cash flow circumstances that may mean we second guess the fund manager decision every now and then to deliver a better result. And so, we're working on this concept called Platform Alpha, which is delivering an additional performance benefit by using the managed account. If we can get there and prove it, it will clearly be in the client's best interest, and I think that's what we all do.
James, do you have a view?
Yeah, I think that's well articulated by Jason. I think there are probably two things I'd say that really have struck me in the sort of whole in the Royal Commission and everything that's come out is that, look, in any advisor who's out there is looking to implement a managed account solution, probably a lot of decisions, but two important ones. Is that going to be internally constructed with the help of a consultant, or are they going to get that externally constructed and managed on their behalf? And as part of that process, are they going to be earning a revenue or not earning a revenue? I think if you look at what has occurred in the Royal Commission, I think what we have seen is the separation of product and advice has come through clearly in that. And I think the other thing that really has struck me as part of it was really what I call substance over form in terms of the reviews that have taken place. So just because something happens to be an NDA and it's not really a product, at the end of the day, it's a product in terms of the substance angle. And I think that's really important. We've seen some high-profile cases of that in the last few months where you've got to demonstrate, to Jason's point, the best interest of that in the client.
So there seems to be... Oh, sorry, Ben.
I think I mentioned earlier this reassessment. I think what the Royal Commission, what best interest, even if I go back to when FSR came in and FOFA, for those businesses, whether they be us as fund managers, platforms or advisors that have seen it as a chance to say, who's the client who's with us in 10 years? And if it's about engagement, they've used this as a chance to say, how do I do it better? And I think that's the best outcome. And if that means looking at a managed account for the business that I'm in, we've seen more and more of that. And to me, I think they're the businesses that in the 10 to 20 years will see their practice revenue increase, the value of their business increase as well.
Before we go on to the next issue, just a reminder that if you've got a question that you'd like any of the panellists to answer this afternoon, type it into the control panel that's on the screen in front of you, hopefully. It'll pop up in the room here and we'll have a crack at answering it at the end. So given what we've just been talking about regarding technology developments, managed account implementation and the Royal Commission's focus on client outcomes, putting the client at the centre of everything that happens. How can technology and managed accounts really address the advisor's best interests duty? There seems to be a misconception in some quarters that the best interests duty might equate to the cheapest alternative. What do we think about actually discharging the duty genuinely?
Yeah, I think that, obviously it's not about just fees, best interest duty. And, while that's the number one focus of best interest duty, it's not just about fees. There's also obviously the outcomes to the client and the features and services they're receiving. But I think as an industry, we've been relatively poor at identifying the value that's being delivered and reporting that to the client. So we tend to provide the advice and implement it, but there's not a lot of... and I think this is where technology has to play a role. There's not a lot of going back and saying, here's the advice I gave you, and this is what it was worth. And I think we can do that. And I think managed accounts, again, they play an important role here in that we could track and simulate, here you were on this path. We put you in this portfolio, and this is your result. Now,
so it's an opportunity to actually quantify the value of advice.
Absolutely. And I think part of the Royal Commission it's been interesting watching the industry trying to defend itself without really having a lot of tools and data to actually assess that. And I think that we've got to really improve that side of it. And I'm not just talking about advisors, I think the entire industry has to become better at explaining what it is, the value we add, what the fee justification is. And look, if the value's not there, we can't justify the fees, that's how it's going to be. But I think we just need to put a lot more effort into explaining how we add value and what that value is actually worth.
Yeah, I think the term that I've tried to use when I work with advisors to describe this is there's no hesitation in my mind that advisors obviously add value. We all know that, because we have an industry, we do have it, but it's the demonstration of that tangible and intangible value to what Jason mentioned. Now, how do you actually demonstrate that to the client? So, look, I think from a managed account perspective, one of the things that I think we need to be, I think advisors would need to be aware of as they implement this, is that the days of having the ROAs, that engagement with their client, as the managed account is implemented, that's gone. So one has to develop a client value proposition that's what I call above the line and not below the line. And as part of that, I think we touched on technology earlier. I think if you look at it from a client's perspective, their latest experience with technology is going to be their expectation of advisors going forward. So a simple example, if you're ordering a pizza and they're telling you that pepperoni's going to put on now and it's going to be delivered in 2 hours' time, why shouldn't that happen with a financial advice when it's a rollover or whatever it might happen? So I think the expectation that clients have of what happens in their day-to-day lives will be exactly what will be expected of financial advice, and that's part of that new value proposition that needs to be delivered by advisors.
I think Jason talked about the notion of transparency. I think in a managed account sense, advisors and consultants and clients are much more aware of what's in that account, whether that be a managed fund or a pool of stocks. We've even found within our managed fund complex, we're having more conversations about the entire portfolio. The days where it was just the top 10, charging 1.5% for long-only equities. I think what we've seen happen is, I think through managed accounts has meant if you've got a managed fund, you've got to be prepared to talk about every stock in that portfolio, because there is typically a consultant, a Morningstar in that relationship as well, that want to know that. The advisor and the client want to know it as well. I think it's actually helped drive down our fees.
So do you think the portfolio's come under greater scrutiny as a result?
Most definitely.
You've got to be able to fess up to bad calls as well as good calls.
I started in the industry in 1998. I didn't use the word attribution for the first 10 years, whereas in the last 5, I'm having really good conversation about what's your latest attribution report. Can you show me the good and the bad? And I think on the managed portfolio, so our global managed accounts, they can see it every day. We own 10 cent, and it sells off on the basis of tradable concern. That question's going to be asked to that advisor. I see AB owns 10 cent. What does that mean? I see Trump's tweeted X. So transparency's been amazing. It's just been more engaging.
Now, we've spoken about this a little bit already, but what innovations can you see investment managers, fund managers bringing to market to support platforms and support advisors in delivering solutions?
I think any opaqueness will go. I think this notion of I can't show you these things because that's my skill set of me buying and selling. I think the skill set is the why we bought and sold things. We've certainly found, whether it be with platforms or with consultants, we're doing more that's not just about our funds anymore either. The Royal Commission, we own banks here and around the world. We're having more and more discussions about what's a bank, what's its position, what should it do, what should it do. I think advisors are expecting a hell of a lot more from us than just, here's my funds in the product. We've got to give them insights to other things as well.
Got it. Thanks, Ben. Jason, I'm going to ask you, and then James, I'll ask you as well, to do a little bit of crystal ball gazing here. What technology developments do you think are on the horizon that are particularly exciting?
Look, the landscape is changing so quickly. I mentioned mobile devices before. Other big ticket items like blockchain. ASX is about to adopt a blockchain technology. There's artificial intelligence and machine learning techniques coming through, and in the next few years, all of that will be part of our landscape. And so it really is going to change very significantly in the next few years, which is actually really exciting. But I think what that means for advisors, I think, is that whereas in the past it's been quite a pretty command and control model that platforms have used, thou shalt use our platform to work this way, that's not going to be the case. And advisors will get to choose a much more open architecture approach, where they can use their own CRM, their own email system, via MailChimp, their own reporting tool. They'll have a selection of tools to use to really build their own platform, and in particular build their own client experience and build their own practice efficiency administration back office. And on top of that, there'll be build your own compliance modules, like all working off one data set. And I think that's where it really changes. Platforms moving from just being custodian platforms to being custodians of data. And really helping the advisors to aggregate data together, get that single view of client, and then build that client experience on top of it.
It starts to sound a bit more like a partnership than a sort of transactional relationship.
No doubt. Yeah, and I think the line between product provider and the advisor and licensee, and what goes on in the middle, I think that blurs quite a bit. And whether the platform's providing that piece or others are helping out, is that a technology piece or an independent services piece? I think that gets really blurry.
James, what's coming down the pipeline that excites you?
Yeah, look, I think Jason's right across the technology piece well on for platform implementation. I'll probably take a different angle in terms of what I touch on. I think the technology piece going forward of one of the biggest issues when it comes to advice and implementation is you have some great advice at times and implementation which doesn't align to it, and then the other way around. So I think what we see as we engage with advisors globally and the IFAs locally or RIA equivalents in the US is really this huge move to goals-based advice and implementation, which in my opinion is quite a misunderstood term that's thrown around the industry. And that really is about how you ensure that the investment strategy that's actually implemented is aligned from an advice perspective and it actually speaks the same language. And I think to Jason's point earlier, talking about the demonstration of value, it's very easy to have that conversation when you've got that technology to help you deliver that sort of the value proposition sort of conversation. I think that's where we seem, and probably to the question you asked earlier about fund managers, is that I know for a fact if you take a huge investment for us as a firm is in client engagement technology, and that's really to support advisors as they go down the managed account approach, which is at times an outsourced solution.
Right, thank you. Right. Let's have a crack at answering some questions. I was hoping that writing was going to be a bit bigger. I've got the wrong glasses with me. We've got a question here from Greg. How do managers feel about their investment IP being edited or adjusted by overlay from advisors for client preferences? Ben, that might be a question for you.
It is for me. Happy to answer. Look, once an allocation is made to our global managed account, if there's a stock in there that we agree to sell that client wants to keep, that's a great outcome for that client because that's what the advisor has said. It could be a certain sector. Jason talked about a tax base there as well. With platforms today, you can actually put rules in place to say if a manager sells at this date, it's disadvantageous for me from a 12-month rule perspective. That's a great outcome. We've got no problem. We're still going to buy or sell stock based on what we think we should be buying or selling. That won't change with it.
Okay. All right, here's another question. This is from Leo. Thanks for the question, Leo. Do you think technology advancements will enable platform providers to lower their fees and even cap fees and still maintain their profit margins?
Oh, be careful here, we're ASX listed and I don't want to get into trouble. Great question. So in 30 years in this industry, I've seen platform fees only go in one direction. They've never increased. There's been a slow decrease over that time, and largely because of the scale that we're now sitting at. We're not talking small hundreds of $1 million platforms and billions. Some of the platforms are now reaching 100 billion in size, and that will only get bigger. And though the benefits of that scale will obviously be shared with the client through lower fees and increased competition, and we're absolutely seeing that in the market today. So I don't doubt that that's where the fees are going. I don't think we're falling off a cliff at any time, but there is still a gradual progression towards lower fees. Will we be able to maintain our profit margins? Well, yep, absolutely. Hub is planning to do that, but it's a competitive market. We'll see where it pans out.
Okay, thanks, Jason. James, this might be one for you. Does this mean the end for the managed fund structure in Australia? And if these structures are not optimal from a tax optimisation consideration, then where do they fit?
Yeah, again, another good question. Look, from our perspective, there is a real, the quality of a managed fund is the blank sheet of paper of what an investment manager's IP is. So what I mean by that is, I know when we manage a multi-asset portfolio in a managed fund structure, we can do whatever we want in terms of what is the right outcome to get the client to that goal. Obviously, as you work with different platforms, and a great example is, we were talking earlier, Hub can do international securities. Not all platforms can do that. So you're limited in terms of how you can implement derivatives, hedging, those sorts of things. So a managed fund will always be, it's a great vehicle for certain clients, absolutely. It doesn't give you the benefits of beneficial ownership. To Ben's point now, we can exclude stocks, just tax, etc. However, I think for a certain type of client, it is absolutely spot on, and it will always be a manager's best thinking in IP.
Can I chip in on that as well?
Yeah.
I do think it's never been an and/or.
Yeah.
I do think the onus, if you're building a managed fund today, you're thinking about it very differently. And we launched all our new ones here in 2014, and we talk about tax every month. Like, you do look at your pool, you look at the units that are going in, you're much more aware of that as a fund manager than probably what we have been in the past. And I think if you're operating in the small cap, the long short, the alternative space, there's definitely benefits of having a unitised structure there. I think the challenges there are your concentrated long only equity, where you've got SMAs available for transparency and price. People may move more to those in the future.
Yeah, just to add to that, managed funds will always be part of the landscape. You know, it's very hard to replicate some of the asset classes that managed funds have in a managed account. And by the way, managed accounts do sit over the top of portfolios of managed funds.
Absolutely.
So it is absolutely both, not either or.
Yeah. And I think if I can add one more thing, just on the I've touched a lot on client value proposition here. If you've got a client who is an accumulator who's paying a very low advice fee, at times if you've got direct security exposure, it's how do you get that exposure for that particular stock. In addition to that is the client engagement approach that needs to take place is significantly more, and what you don't want to, you want to make sure you're delivering value for the fees that you charge. That is best interest, and you want to make sure that that's aligned. And I think a fund will always have plus the best practices, as Jason just said now.
Thanks, James. Right, we might make this the last question that we answer. As a global manager, the price of individual stocks are considerable. How do we make global managed portfolios accessible at, it's my eyes, to all investor sizes? Ben, do you want to take that one?
Yeah.
It's tough. The answer is it's not possible for all in a global managed account position, and the reason being is in Australia we're not used to buying a company like Bookings, the travel company. It's $2,000 a stock. Our most expensive stocks have hovered around 200 and have since retreated back there. Your Apples and your Googles have been up to 800, some go to 1,000. That's just the price they're paid for in those jurisdictions. So what we tend to do in that instance is, if we've got a portfolio of stocks and they're our best ideas, if the portfolio can't hit that minimum amount, which in our case is 65,000, we just allocate more cash. So it is possible, but for the best thing for the client would not be to try and buy one of those stocks. You need to buy multiples of those, but they're our best ideas, so we're not going to change buying those stocks because of their price. It's either that's going to be the right portfolio, or you have a higher cash weight, or a competitor comes along and says, well, I'm prepared to do it. These are the stocks I'm buying, and we can take a loan. We think that's healthy.
From Hub's point of view, we are absolutely looking at a solution which would deliver, being able to invest in any portfolio with $1,000, and that would mean some way of fractionalising those units, and so that's certainly on our agenda.
Well, that brings us to the end of the allotted time this afternoon. So before we wrap up, I'd just like to thank each of our panellists, Jason, James and Ben. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank you also for spending the last 30 minutes with us talking through some of the issues related to managed portfolios. If you've enjoyed the conversation and you'd like to know a little bit more or read a little bit more, you can check out HUB24's white paper, The Future of Managed Portfolios. That's a paper that was produced in collaboration with Core Data, so you know it's going to be good. Yeah. Explores what the future holds based on interviews with a series of industry leaders, and looks at how managed portfolio providers are moving quickly to meet increased demand for these solutions. I'd also like to very quickly mention a survey that HUB24 and the AFA are jointly conducting at the moment, investigating one of the most topical areas of advice, which is, of course, the best interests duty. When you received the invitation for this webinar, there was a link to the survey. It's a survey that's being managed by Core Data. If you're able to click through and complete that survey for us, that would be absolutely sensational. It'll take about 10 minutes. You could win one of 4 $1,000 Flight Centre gift cards. Yeah, right, big bucks. Or one of 20 $100 gift pay online gift cards, and I'm legally obliged to mention that the full T's and C's are available online. But thank you again for your time this afternoon. Thank you very much to our panellists. Thanks to HUB24 for facilitating today's discussion. I'd like to close the webinar now, and from me, Simon Hoyle, it's goodbye for now.
Clear.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That was really good.
So far. 4 minutes, I think.
What I agree, Newman was asking.